Good morning, Liberty. We are live on Friday morning, November the 16th, 2018. I hope you're having a wonderful Friday so far. Thank you for tuning in and joining me here today on the show. My name is Michael Bolden, broadcasting live from here on the West Coast in my downtown LA home studio, 9:30 a.m. like we do every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. I'm not going to do next week, Friday, the day after Thanksgiving. It's a pretty busy time for all of us, so keep in mind that the show will not be happening live next week, Friday. I might try to have something pre-recorded at that time so you have something interesting to watch over the weekend. I do want to say hi for those of you who are watching live in the YouTube chat. Hello, I appreciate you being there. Woodsider, Ward Lawrence, awesome. Todd Baker, good to see you, man. Not that I'm excited. I haven't seen you in the chat, so that's pretty cool. Really good to see you. Thanks for being here with me. We're also on, for those of you who aren't aware, we also do this as an audio-only podcast as of about a week or two now. And so you can find us on iTunes under Good Morning Liberty and on Google Music or Google Podcasts, Google Play maybe. Also search for us, Good Morning Liberty, subscribe, and leave a positive rating because, of course, it's your favorite show on earth. Hi to EHP Training as well in the live chat. Today, I want to talk about some mass surveillance. We saw this horrible, I guess, enlightening report about really, really bad things happening in regards to mass surveillance and a partnership between state and local governments. It's not good, but it can be stopped, and I think that's really the positive thing here. So I do want to discuss this a little bit, a report that came out from Electronic Frontier Foundation. I also, just as an aside, for those who are watching on the video stream, either through YouTube or when we post later to Brighteon or Keyport.tv, or BitChute, who just got kicked off of PayPal, which is very unfortunate, but I see that they're using crypto to try to keep their site going and the funding that they need to keep that important site alternative to places like here on YouTube intact. So you may notice that I changed some lighting. I noticed about a week or so I've done a couple of changes, and I want to encourage anybody who watches the video or listens, if you see a problem or you think something's weird, just tell me. Leave a comment. Let me know. Shoot an email over to team at 10thamendmentcenter.com. I noticed last week, first of all, that the audio all of a sudden was much lower. Maybe I had done something with the positioning. I've got this sit-stand desk. I don't know. Maybe I moved something around with the mic. So I tried to angle this Rode Podcaster, which is this nice dynamic mic that I've had for a number of years, that was fixed under warranty after I stopped doing a podcast years ago. So it's cool. Rode has very good customer service, RODE. And so I angled it towards me, not knowing that the dynamic mic, the range of it didn't work well. And so then the shock mount that it's in on Monday's show, every time I got excited and started banging on the desk, I noticed that the shock mount the mic was hitting the mount and it was making all this noise. So I apologize for that. So then I learned that angling it straight up, it actually has a better audio quality. So hopefully there's no audio issues today. If there are, please just leave a message. Let me know. Hey, it sucks, Bolden. You got to do something about this, and I'll research it. I don't really know the answers. It's a lot of trial and error. And then I also noticed on Wednesday's show, and I don't watch these all the way through. There's one thing I can't stand is watching myself sometimes. But I have to look every now and then because I want to make it a nice quality, even though it is obviously home produced here. And I noticed that I was getting this horrible glare on my glasses, and that's because I'm right next to the window over here looking over 2nd Street in downtown Los Angeles. And so even though all the lights are off, so I decided to put up some blackout curtains and then crank up the ISO on my Sony and the camera, and hopefully it looks decent too. Short version, I've been trying to rework a few things, and I'm going to keep improving the video end of things over time. Maybe add some actual professional lights instead of the shop light that I have right up over my head. And I know I've had a lot of people ask me about the software that I use, which is Wirecast. And one of these days, I'm just going to kind of go through all the stuff that I use because I know a number of other people run organizations or do podcasts and things like that tune into the show from time to time. And I'll just show you what I'm using, and then maybe we can collaborate on trying to improve the quality. Anyways, rambling. I appreciate you being here with me. It's Happy Friday. I hope you're going to have an awesome weekend, but let's talk about the bad news, and that is automated license plate reader surveillance, tracking you through pictures of your license plate. So those red light cameras, bad news. They're taking pictures, and I think the number is thousands of pictures per minute that they can do. I don't know if it's per minute. It's some ungodly number that we can't even fathom, that they can actually get the picture, recognize the license plate, match it to a person, put it in a database, all within a blink of an eye. So more than what traffic can even go past it. Red light cameras, fast track if you're in places like here in California. Southern California, it's kind of new. Here in Los Angeles, there's really only one freeway that has these fast track things where they've actually slowed down. They made the traffic problem worse in Los Angeles because they took out the carpool lane, the high occupancy lane, and then they squeezed everybody into all the regular lanes, the 4 or 5 lanes. Sometimes it's 6, sometimes it's 3, whatever. But they squeezed 2 lanes out and made those fast track. And then at first, at least 2 years ago, almost no one was using it. So you'd be stuck on the 110 freeway with these 2 wide open ones. I guess the idea is that they're punishing everybody who don't opt into their system. And then they slowly feel like that they're going to get people to opt in. But those cameras that check to see if those transponders that check to see if you have the little box in your car to make sure that you are signed up for the fast track system and that they're billing you based on how many times you go past them. They're also taking pictures of your license plate of your vehicle. Now, I'll do another show at some point talking about how they've actually added facial recognition to many of these devices. And they can actually tell who's in the passenger seat of a vehicle as well. So they put license plate trackers on not only on the fast track, but on the red light cameras. But then they also mount them all over the place. They can be mounted to the top of a cop car. Here, let me put a picture of one of these things up. Hold on a second here. Here we go. This is a picture of automated license plate readers. It looks like these little lights, for those of you who are watching rather than just listening, looks like little lights below the cop lights on the top of the vehicle. They go front, side, and I believe they also point to the back. So they're getting basically a 360 view, and anybody that passes by, it's got like a trigger, and it's just snapping pictures, and it knows everybody that's going where they are. And then they put them into these databases, and then they share the databases with everybody. So think of an example of how this can be used by an evil government. And I believe Washington, D.C. is the most dangerous government on the face of the earth, the most dangerous entity. Even if, and we posted on Twitter a quote because I put this out as a quote, I said this in a speech last Saturday in Dallas, not necessarily in the speech, but in some Q&A. I referred to Washington, D.C. as the most dangerous government. And I had some people tell me, but it's not as bad. At least it isn't Hillary. And okay, let's say Hillary was there. The problem isn't the personality in charge. The problem is the amount of power that makes something dangerous. So let's say the current administration, the current apparatus, and even if you love the administration, you can't like all the bureaucracy, the deep state behind it doing all kinds of bad stuff. So let's say for some crazy reason, all the stars aligned and everything that came out of Washington, D.C. was awesome. It was total 100% liberty. Basically, it dissolved itself in most situations. Think about that. Let's say it was great. But it had the power to continue to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants, to tell you what size toilet you can have when you have to fight and die for their wars. They can deflate the currency, restrict your right to defend yourself, your family, and your property. As long as that power still exists, it's still as dangerous as ever. Just because it is choosing to not violate your rights does not mean it is not dangerous. And in fact, Patrick Henry, we've often referred to a quote that he said, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't actually know it off the top of my head, but he said, "Show me an age and a country where liberty was preserved, where the people relied on its rulers being good men." So as long as you're relying on them to be good, your liberty is gone. So the amount of power that is in Washington, D.C. is the largest government in the history of the world. It has the most power, the biggest military. There's some debate as to the size in comparison to others. The number that I cite is that the U.S. federal military empire has the same amount of spending as the next 10 to 12 countries combined. So just the increase in the U.S. military budget under the National Defense Authorization Act of 2019, just the increase from 2018 to 2019 is more than the entire annual budget for Russia, who we're supposed to be afraid of all the time, instead of the other way around. So government is extremely dangerous. And these license plate readers are a big part of it. They like to know exactly what everyone's doing. So look, if you're watching this the video, you can see the license plate readers, or I'll call them ALPRs, mounted on top of a cop car. That cop car could be positioned in front of a gun show, for example, because, of course, we don't want anyone to be able to defend themselves and be able to make a purchase through the gun show loophole, in quotes. We don't want people to be able to make a purchase freely with another human being without the government actually knowing that the purchase is happening and telling you whether or not you can make that exchange. So that's the way that the statists think. And so that cop car could be positioned outside of a gun show. And then they're recording the license plates of everybody going in and out of that gun show. Well, they certainly have a good idea of everyone who's making a purchase or who is interested. And now let's say that is banned at some point in the future. Well, they're going to have a list of suspects or people that they don't like. Well, let's say having certain firearms means you go on a watch list. Let's say owning a bump stock at some point, because there's some other terrorist attack or violence. At some point, if you own a bump stock, some authoritarians decide, and I know gun owners, many professional ones, and I'm an amateur. I don't actually even own a firearm. I'm trying to learn how to use them. But I've had many gun owners tell me, oh, bump stock, this is amateur garbage. Unless, of course, you have a disability and you actually need something like that. But a lot of times I've heard that. But whether it's a good product or a bad one is less of the point. I think there's a likelihood that they're going to ban them. We know that Donald Trump said they're gone. He is personally making sure that they're gone. This is totally unconstitutional, totally violates the Second Amendment. It is awful, and it's coming from the NRA-backed president. So let's say they decide this is going to happen. And at some point, the next administration comes in, Elizabeth Warren, whoever is in charge, and they decide people who own bump stocks should be on a watch list because they're dangerous. So every time they go through the TSA, they try to travel to visit family during Thanksgiving, they're pulled aside, or maybe they're blocked from flying. And you can't get off. You can't find out. You can't request removal. They're just putting you there. And the propensity, the danger of this type of power is really bad. Now let's look. EHP training, awesome. Oh my, I am in trouble. Good. That is a good human being right there. And thank you to Joseph Standridge. Looks and sounds great. I'm doing my best trying to improve this. I do actually like, as a personal interest, kind of tinkering with audio and video stuff. So again, please let me know if there's anything that needs to be worked on. So let's go into this report. There's a report that came out this week from the Electronic Frontier Foundation. If you are interested in privacy-related issues, I know a lot of the people that work there tend to be more from the left end of the spectrum. I have a very good friend that I think that every time I see him, I give him a hug, Shahid Buttar. He ran against Nancy Pelosi. He's definitely a progressive, but he's a very, very good human being. I shouldn't say but. Shahid's a wonderful human being. He used to be the head of an organization called the Bill of Rights Defense Committee that worked very closely with my organization, 10th Amendment Center, to try to pass legislation to undermine and nullify NDAA indefinite detention. He moved to San Francisco to work at EFF, and he focuses on organizing, grassroots organizing for privacy. He did run for Congress. I wish, I love him, but I wish he wouldn't do that. Anyways. I think he does much better work focusing on this particular issue for the EFF. So anyways, EFF is an excellent organization because one of the reasons they're excellent is because they really don't get into the partisan nonsense. ACLU we've worked with on privacy-related things, but they've acted more like a partisan think tank, a partisan lobbying organization in the last year or two, and I find that very disappointing. My friend Thaddeus Russell, if you don't listen to his podcast, it's really fun. It's really interesting. Long shows, like 3 hours. Thaddeus has been hammering on ACLU for a long time. And this guy comes from a radical left background as well. So he's known of and worked with ACLU for a long time through his family. But EFF is very good. They're really not, they're not partisan hacks. And they just focus on privacy and surveillance and technology issues. So they did a project with Muckrock, which is an online publication. They filed hundreds of public record requests with law enforcement agencies around the country to reveal how data collected from ALPRs is used to track the travel patterns of drivers. We focused exclusively on departments that contract with surveillance vendor Vigilant Solutions to share data between their ALPR systems. So the danger, of course, is on the local level, that they certainly they certainly are collecting the information. The local governments can use it and build these databases, create understandings, profiles of people. But that's dangerous in and of itself. But what becomes even more dangerous with this ALPR system, this license plate data, where you're actually being tracked for the crime of driving around, going to your car and going someplace. Or if you're adding facial recognition through your Uber, or, well, I mean, they get it through the app anyways. So the danger is that they're taking this information, they're dumping them in through fusion centers into national and possibly, I'm sure, it goes international databases. So everybody ends up having access to it. So if you're in Boise, Idaho, and you're being tracked by a cop, stalked, I should say, then the NSA has the information. The DEA has the information. The FBI. The Honolulu Police Department has it. And so does the Savannah, Georgia Police Department. Everybody's sharing information with everybody. So it's turning all these local law enforcement agencies into subdivisions of a nationwide law enforcement force, which shouldn't exist under the Constitution. So they only focused on one vendor of these ALPRs, and there are many others. Vigilant Solutions. And they got records from 200 agencies. And over 2016 and 2017, there were 2.5 billion license plate scans. 2.5 billion. I went to government school, so my math is garbage. If every human being alive in the United States owned a vehicle and drove once, what is that? Like 7 times they're in the database in 2 years? 2.5 billion. And it's probably much more than that because they only got this from 200. They only got records from 200 agencies. I'm assuming they were denied from many more because they filed hundreds of requests. So it could be 5 billion plus all the other billions that weren't accounted for from other vendors. Vigilant is the big one. I would be comfortable saying at least 6 billion records. Now, here's the juicy part. The information, according to EFF, shows that 95% of the license plates scanned were not under suspicion at the time the vehicle's plates were collected. So in other words, they're all being tracked, again, for the crime of existing and going someplace, the crime of travel. Travel is no longer a right. Travel is a privilege that will be monitored and stored in a database. So then they take this information on everybody. They throw it in through fusion centers or something known as the information sharing environment, which came out of the Patriot Act after 9/11, and it goes everywhere. So here's the overview. EFF says, at its core, ALPR is a simple technology. These systems are a combination of high-speed cameras and optical character recognition technology. That is not simple in my mind, but maybe there's much worse. That can identify license plates and turn them into machine-readable text. After the plate data is collected, the ALPR systems upload the information to a central database along with the time, date, and GPS coordinates. Cops can search these databases to see where drivers have traveled or identify vehicles that visited certain locations, like my example of talking about going to a gun show. You could talk about going to a marijuana dispensary. You could talk about going to a political rally, supporting a particular candidate or opposing one, or a protest. Think of all the ways that a really, really bad government could use this information. And as my warning in the beginning was talking about, it's not the fact that they just happen to maybe not be using this information in that way now, but they certainly could at some time in the future. And I should have had a quote of the day, the Patrick Henry one, but I am not going to be able to find that without a really long, awkward silence here. But Patrick Henry's quote, we should not. There is no way liberty can survive if we're simply relying on the government people to be good. When they have this kind of power, you might get lucky and they won't use it. But over time, some really nasty people are going to see that power exists and see an opportunity and try to grab the reins of power so they can use it. It's actually going to draw, not the cream to the top, but it's going to draw the bad people towards that ring of power. EFF goes on, it's crucial to remember that ALPR is a mass surveillance technology that spies on every driver on the road and logs their location, regardless of whether or not they are suspected of being involved in a crime. So again, we're talking about mounting them on police vehicles, mounting them on any vehicle, putting them on a drone. So there's drones that are being, a lot of local law enforcement agencies are using drones. Most of the drones are very expensive. We're not talking about those hobby drones from Amazon or wherever else, the toy stores. I know Toys R Us is bankrupt, but wherever people are getting those, a couple $100. We're talking about high-tech ones with high-tech cameras. Really, really expensive. I know the Houston Police Department had about $300,000 worth of these things. They don't have the money to get this, so they get a grant from the Department of Homeland Security. Usually it's the DHS JAG grant. And so the Department of Homeland Security is providing either direct cash or just handing them the drones. And so this is a federal program to encourage local law enforcement to spy on people. And then when the spying happens, they collect the information, and as we see, they share them to a central database. And I'm going to get into some of where that goes once it's in the database to give you kind of a picture of how this all plays out, because the dots really do connect. So again, they also can be, look at this one. I pulled up another picture here too. This was from, I think this was in Redondo Beach here in Southern California. We did a report on this. You can pull into a private parking structure, and of course they're just using, they want to do a kind of parking monitoring, so they say that people aren't there for too long of time. And if you're watching, it's basically like on a giant tripod, and they've got the little ALPR type camera sticking out at the top at the entrance and the exit of the parking open air parking lot, and that way they know everyone who's gone in and out. I don't know. Seems harmless, right? Oh, we just want to make sure that they're monitoring. They just want to make sure they're controlling their property. But the thing is this information is being shared. And let's take a look. There was a long thread which really just brought me to this from EFF. And thanks for Robert Sanderson. EFF is excellent, except when it comes to net neutrality. And I have that instinct myself. I see them very aggressive in favor of net neutrality, and I actually don't know much about it. So I can't speak with any authority. I know my friends at Mises Institute are generally opposed to it, so I kind of just have confirmation bias that I'm assuming that they're pretty solid. And Justin Bayola, it's going to stay fecked until it's not. Yeah, this is bad news. But there is a way to actually do something about this, so I'll talk about that briefly at least. So EFF, this long thing. So Austin Police Department, for example, and I'll put a link to the show notes. It should already be here on YouTube unless I screwed something up. But if you're following us and subscribing through our other channels, BitChute or iTunes or wherever, go to 10thAmendmentCenter.com/Good Morning Liberty. 10thAmendmentCenter.com/Good Morning Liberty. You find all of our shows, and the most recent one should have all the links to subscribe everywhere, and I'll have this link to this Twitter thread from EFF. But some of the data. For example, the Austin Police Department, and I love how they actually tag the Austin Police Department in this. They collected 25 million license plate scans from 2015 to 2016. It shares the data with at least 817 other agencies. 817. The 21st Drug Task Force, 32nd Judicial District Attorney's Office. I don't know. Everybody. ATF National Account. ATF. Wow. So I was literally just talking about how they might go to a gun show. I did not look at that before. That's amazing. And I wonder if, unless it means something other than, I'm just assuming that's what it means. I believe that this is what they want to use it for. But it says there in the screenshot from EFF that they're sharing with ATF. Bad news. Roswell, Georgia is collected 1.2 million license plate scans from 2016 to 2017 and shares it with also 539 agencies. You can just scroll through and through this. Even small towns are collecting and sharing ALPR data. Hiram, Georgia, a population of 4,000 people. 4,000 people collected 32,000 plates. And it shares that data with 833 other agencies, including ICE, Immigration, and the Honolulu Police Department. So it's definitely going to the federal agencies. It's going to every state agency. So everybody around the country, hundreds of agencies around the country. They can definitely create behavior analytics, like Justin Bayola says in the chat. What kind of behavior analytics you can get with this info? They say metadata isn't a big deal. It is, and this is even worse. They also point out the New Jersey State Police collected 20 million license plate scans, but they wouldn't tell us who they share the data with. We know it's going everywhere. Fusion centers, bad, should be closed. Information sharing environment, dangerous, comes from the federal level. You can opt out. So how do you deal with this? In our annual State of the Nullification Movement report, which I talk about repeatedly, which you find over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/report. 10thamendmentcenter.com/report. It's updated through 2017. Mike Meharry does a vast majority of the writing on that. He's in the process of updating it for 2018. We'll release it in the next month or so. But on page 39 at 10thamendmentcenter.com/report, you see our section on ALPR license plate tracking. And it talks about the process that we learned a few years ago. The Wall Street Journal, someone broke it through the Wall Street Journal, that the DEA has been running this license plate tracking program for 8 years. So I think it's 10 now. So it had been running for 8 years, all in secret. No public comment, no nothing. And primarily, the license plate data was being collected by state and local law enforcement and then fed to the DEA. Well, the only way you can deal with that, well, I think the positive is that it is being collected by state and local law enforcement and not being collected by the DEA. The DEA does not have the ability to deploy license plate readers everywhere. They try to, but because they get rejected oftentimes. So, for example, there was a highway in Utah, and I should actually pull up and do the research on this a little further so we can do an article. But I had seen there was a highway going through Utah that the feds wanted to put ALPRs on, and the state said no. Now, I'm assuming the state is running their own, and maybe there was some kind of contractual thing going on. But the state said no, so the feds had to back off. But the feds have tried to do this, and they haven't had a lot of success setting it up. And they haven't really needed to because the states and local law enforcement agencies are such willing partners. So how do you deal with it? Well, no data means no license plate tracking program. So instead of focusing on Washington, trying to stop the DEA, the DHS, the FBI, ICE, whatever, all these people that are tracking everybody wherever they go, focus community by community or state by state to say, you know what? If you're going to use these things, and I would make the argument, and I think there is a strong argument to be made that they shouldn't even have access to this type of stuff because they can't be trusted with it. But if they're going to have it, they have to destroy the information immediately, and they can't share it. So we've seen a number of states pass laws to do this. In Montana, in 2017, they overwhelmingly approved a bill that restricts ALPR use to specific law enforcement purposes. So it can't be placed everywhere. So in Montana, supposedly, we have to follow up on this, they're not just deploying them everywhere. And then on top of it, any data collected by an ALPR cannot be stored for more than 90 days or a state or a federal warrant. They can't just store the information and keep it forever. Here in California, I think they keep it for like 15 years. So in Montana, they're saying if you're going to keep it more than 90 days and try to match it to some watch list garbage, which I think there's problems there, this is a positive step forward, you have to have a warrant. And we know that 99.5% of the 2.5 billion records collected were not for criminal activity. So the courts are not even part of this process. So a preservation request will only be valid for a year. It prevents the states from creating permanent databases and using the information collected by ALPRs, which makes it highly unlikely that the data will end up in federal databases. Short version, the process forward is not to try to get federal legislation because the feds are really, really the bad guys. The states and locals are also bad on this as well, but it is easier to pressure them to do positive things. We've seen Minnesota, New Hampshire, Utah, Arkansas, and Montana have all taken steps to restrict the collection and sharing of this data. We're going to keep pushing forward to make that happen as we get into the 2019 state legislative session. I know Ward Lawrence down in Texas is watching. There is a bill in Texas, I can't remember the number. I wish I had it off the top of my head. That just flat out seems to authorize ALPRs for all legitimate law enforcement purposes. We know they're going to twist that like crazy down there. So there are some bad bills that are introduced every year that try to expand this. We've seen some like that in Pennsylvania, but we've seen some positive efforts to cut back that even if they're going to use these things, that they can't create permanent databases and they can't share them with other agencies. So Honolulu has no need, the Honolulu Police Department has no need to know what store I went to here in Los Angeles. And neither does the DEA or ICE or the FBI or the Athens, Georgia Police Department or Baltimore or whatever. They don't know. I mean, even the LAPD shouldn't know this. But if I've got my own problem, my own neighborhood, let me deal with them. That shouldn't be everybody else's issue. Anyways, I hope you found this interesting. It's scary stuff. There is a positive way forward. It's going to take a lot of work. I think we are in a very, very bad place on the surveillance stuff. And the time is now to start pushing back on it, to start making positive changes. We're grateful for organizations like EFF and others who are with us on this. And we're very grateful for those of you who are with us here today. I hope you have some nice plans for the weekend. We'll be back Monday and Wednesday of next week prior to Thanksgiving, before we take a little bit of time off here, and just at least a day and a half, maybe 2 days off before back to work. And I really appreciate you spending some time with me. And I didn't mention it earlier in the show, but if you are watching, it means a great deal to me if you smash the like button. If you hit that like button, it helps trigger any algorithms out there that tell these platforms to share the video with more people. So please smash the like button. Thank you to everyone in the chat room. Brad Krause, Woodsider, Justin Bayola, Ward Lawrence, EHP Training, Robert Sanderson, Joseph Standridge, Todd Baker, all of you who have been watching. And if you're watching later on in the archives, I appreciate you as well. Please don't hesitate to leave a comment, some thoughts, or some ideas on things you'd like me to cover in the future, or email team@10thamendmentcenter.com. Thank you again for watching. I hope you have a great Friday, a wonderful weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday on Good Morning Liberty.